why are we not showing girls what girls can be and can do? And also, why are we not showing boys what girls and women are capable of?
Welcome to Let's Be Friends, a podcast about women's friendships. I'm Izzy, and a very warm welcome to my guest, Sarah.
Hello.
Who is here from End Sexism in Schools. And we're going to talk today about the work that your organisation does and some of your experiences, some of your findings as an organisation and things like that. So, yeah, thanks very much for coming on. Could you tell us a little bit about what End Sexism in Schools is as an organisation?
Absolutely. And thanks, first of all, for inviting me on. End Sexism in Schools is a charity. We were established to try and, first of all, understand the extent to which sexism plays a part in our school system, but also to tackle it, because through anecdotal evidence, we had a very strong sense that things were not gender equal in the classroom and in our school system. So a lot of what we do is about researching what's happening in different subjects, and we've tackled the English literature curriculum, history curriculum, and we're going to move on to sports, PE next.
Interesting.
So that's looking at the taught curriculum, if you like. But we also look at the way in which schools socialise children, which we would call the hidden curriculum. And that can be things like the use of language, uniform policies, and also girls and boys' different access to resources, whether that's physical resources in terms of playground space, or maybe things like teacher time or teacher attention.
Oh, interesting.
Particularly in something like sports, we'd be looking at, does girls' netball get cancelled because the boys need the playing field, or those sorts of issues.
Oh, interesting. And what have been some of your findings so far in the research that you've been doing?
Well, we've been looking at the English curriculum both at Key Stage 3, where there's much more flexibility in the curriculum and what's taught, and at Key Stage 4 at GCSE level. And the findings have been sort of wholly shocking, I would say.
Yeah.
So this incredible reliance on very few texts, all of them authored by white men. And even more significant than that, we find that what's being taught is only really dealing with the stories of men's lives. So it's not just that they're written by men, it's that they're all about men and men's experiences and men's thoughts. So where there are female characters, they're very much secondary and presented in context with their relationship with the men. Or they may even be very marginalised. So you take something like Of Mice and Men, the novel by John Steinbeck. The only female character in the novel isn't even given a name, and she dies, and it's presented as being her own fault for being sexually attractive. So it's been quite shocking. For instance, in 2022, when we did the first round of GCSE research, we discovered that only 2% of students at GCSE were studying a whole text written by a woman.
Wow. That
2%.
is minuscule.
Minuscule. And
so they're really lacking, as you say, women's perspectives and women's voices.
Yeah, and kind of worse than that, the texts that dominate, there are 3 texts that really dominate: An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley, Christmas Carol, and Jekyll and Hyde. And they account for something like 90-odd%
Oh, wow.
of what's
That's
taught.
really
So
narrow.
I think something like 75% of the students are studying An Inspector Calls. We've just refreshed that research, and we've been really looking at what exactly the exam boards are stipulating and what can be done to change this. Because An Inspector Calls, we're launching this next round of research on the 21st of August. But a sneak preview of the finding is that An Inspector Calls has been on the syllabus for 39 years now. So it's just incredible that there's no change, and there's no kind of impetus for the boards to change. There's no impetus for the schools to change because it's costly and it's difficult and it's expensive, and it means rewriting lesson plans and buying new books. And the exam boards are not prepared to change. There are 4 exam boards that are offering GCSE English literature in England and Wales. And none of them is really incentivised to change, because if one changes, schools will just flip to one of the other boards. So it needs, we think, system change, and that really means that the Department for Education need to take this issue seriously and mandate change. So mandate the removal of some of these texts that have been on the curriculum forever and replacing them with more diverse texts.
And what kinds of regulation do you think need to be brought in to make that happen?
Well, you could have a pairing. So you could have the situation where a school has to teach for every text taught by a male author centering a male character, there has to be an equivalent text by a female author with a female protagonist. So that would give you some equality, because at the moment you've got a set text list which looks diverse, but if none of those texts are actually being taught, it's just window dressing as far as we're concerned.
And what impact do you think it has on girls in these classes who are only studying these texts by male authors with male protagonists?
I think it's very demotivating. We all know if you can't see it, you can't be it. So why are we not showing girls what girls can be and can do? And also, why are we not showing boys what girls and women are capable of?
Absolutely.
There's so much talk about the manosphere and boys being influenced by malign presences. So why don't we give them some positive alternatives?
Some counter narratives.
Yes. Lots of experts talk about the importance of getting our SHE right and making sure that boys are taught about consent and about relationships, boys and girls. But actually, if they're just getting one lesson once a fortnight, not necessarily taught by a specialist, and then they're going back into the classroom to learn about men's lives, men's achievement, men as scientists, men as artists, male compositions in music. They're not going to think that women have done anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's so important to, as we were saying, like building that empathy, building boys' empathy for girls, and also girls' imaginations of what they and other girls can be like.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. And sort of working in frontline domestic abuse services, you feel that unless we kind of go to the root cause of these things, we're never going to solve the problem. We're just sort of dealing with the consequences endlessly.
Yeah.
But what if we could get into schools and change those perceptions that women aren't property and that they don't deserve to be controlled and abused and dictated to, that they do have agency and they can achieve incredible things. So why don't we reflect that in our teaching and then hopefully bring about a societal change? That's our goal.
Yeah, a very important goal, 100%. Yeah. And when girls come to interact with each other, do you think there's an impact on kind of having had this very narrow, very limited window into what girls can be like? Do you think that affects their relationships with other girls and their kind of, I guess, how they view their potential female friends and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. Because I think if you're not given positive representations of women doing things independently of men and forming friendships and forming relationships and making choices, then it's very difficult to model that behaviour. So girls, you could argue that girls are fed a diet of the sort of Disneyfication of relationships where your whole life is about one day my prince will come, instead of a more positive example of friendship that you might read a novel about the dynamics of friendship, the challenges of female friendship as well. And I think there are lots of really positive examples out there that we could be sharing with students, boys and girls, so that they both have an understanding. I think that it's very easy to see that young girls can be socialised to think that they've got to compete for male attention and that that's their goal. They've got to look attractive in order to get male attention. They've got to behave in a certain way, and that they've actually, they've got to compete against other girls for that light to be shone on them, for them to be picked. And I think that's very negative.
And I think there's sometimes an idea that friendship is almost a placeholder until you find a husband, and then you will become isolated and fully focused in on him, kind of idea.
And be taken away from your friends.
Yeah. And among the books that you've said are most commonly taught, are there any examples of female friendship in those books that, you know, boys and girls are able to see, or is it are women mainly?
I can't think of a single one, actually. I'm just trying to run through the plots. No, not really, no. And I think there are books on the set text list that do have better examples of female friendships, but they're not. If they're not taught, then there's no point in them being on the set text lists even, really.
And are there books sort of outside of the ones that are taught that you think could be taught that would provide better examples?
Yeah, I think there are loads of examples. There are if you're going back to think about Jane Austen, she's fantastic on all sorts of relationships, all sorts of friendships between men, friendships between family members, sisters, but also these terrific female friendships in most of her novels, where you can see differing dynamics and power dynamics and how those are used and how those, if you think about Emma, you've got Emma Woodhouse and her friendship with Harriet Smith.
Yes.
So she sort of takes as her protege and dictates terms to, not necessarily in Harriet's best interest as the no spoilers, but as the novel plays out. But you can see the lessons she learns from that and the respect that she should be according to somebody else's feelings. I think that's a really interesting lesson to learn.
Yeah, I think that is. And in supporting your friend through their life without feeling that you always know better than them about how to live their life, I think is a really important part of growing up, because sometimes it can seem so obvious, like, oh, well, you should just do this and this.
Yeah.
But we're all different people.
Of course. And it plays into my other work is in the domestic violence, for a domestic violence charity, and I work on a helpline. And we get a lot of concerned friends ringing up, which is great, because they will then talk about the steps that they need to take. And often the impetus is to rush in and rescue someone. But actually, that might not be in that person's best interest, or it might not be safe.
Yeah.
So we're on the one hand, very grateful that friends are taking an interest in supporting a survivor of abuse.
Definitely.
But it's important to not project your own outcomes onto someone for whom they might not be the best option.
Definitely. And I think especially because with domestic abuse, so much of it is someone's control over their own life being stripped away from them. I think then anyone supporting that person, it's really important for them to be trying to put power back into their hands, not saying, oh no, let me just take charge now.
Yeah, because they've been often in an abusive relationship, a survivor will have been controlled to the nth degree and will have had all sorts of choices taken away, whether that's financial independence, choosing what they wear, choosing how they socialise, choosing how they parent. So giving them back some power is really important in a friendship, I think. So that's quite interesting, and I think it sort of goes against one's natural instinct to try and save someone.
Yeah, and I think going back to the representation thing, I think having examples where people are navigating difficult things in friendships and supporting people through challenges is really important as well. I think it's important to show the kind of positive sides of friendship and the joys of friendship, but also the kind of grittier, more like navigating a complex situation sides as well.
And what you do, I mean, you can look at Lizzie Bennet and think that her friendship with Charlotte is compromised when Charlotte marries Mr. Collins to an extent, and the dynamics have changed, but they managed to maintain that friendship. So it's a good lesson in how you still love your friend, even though they've made choices that might sit uneasily with you.
Yeah, well, and that you yourself have vehemently rejected.
Yeah, well, but you find a way to stay friends and maintain a relationship through that. That's a really good lesson for children.
100%. Well, and just the idea in general that your friendships don't have to all die upon marriage.
No, you can still maintain them.
Yeah. No, really interesting. And what about in terms of the history side of things?
We were really disappointed that women were so poorly represented in the curriculum. And it even, you pick up a history textbook. So we were looking at secondary schools. So our focus at the moment is on secondary schools because there's more stipulation about what should and shouldn't be taught in terms of the different subject areas. So we did a Freedom of Information survey up to secondary schools in England, and the findings have come back and been quite disappointing, really. Perhaps not very surprising, but very disappointing. That again, you've got this emphasis on women as the supporting characters in a lot of situations. So, you know, women during the Second World War or the First World War, there's an over-reliance on monarchs. There are whole periods of history where women don't seem to have. It's almost as if we didn't really exist.
Yeah.
So we didn't seem to have made any contribution at all in this sort of linear teaching of history. There are whole lessons where there is not a mention of a woman's contribution or achievement or endeavours, or even as they're sort of part of the fabric of society. So that's really incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
You know, we do have this sort of reliance on the great man in history as well.
Sort of the individualising of the process of history,
and of course monarchs get a mention, so you might get some information about Elizabeth I, but considering the length of her reign and all that was achieved during it, relative to Henry VIII, she gets relatively little airtime. And yet we hear about the wives of Henry VIII, not about them with their own agency and what some of them, I mean, obviously not many of them survived him, but what they did and what they went on to do.
But even when we talk about the wives who he had killed, it's not often talked about in a context of, it is like domestic homicide as well. It's political.
He's a serial killer.
Yeah. I feel like it's not tied into this ongoing issue of femicide that we still have today.
Not at all.
Where it is still the case that when women disobey or are no longer serving a purpose, there are certain men who will kill their partners. I feel like it's very much portrayed as this kind of strange quirk of history that's, you know, would never happen anymore. But when, you know, we see when a lot of men, when they have kind of unbridled power, like Harvey Weinstein and all of these cases, it's an ongoing issue, and it's a continuity of violence against women that still needs to be addressed in the present day. I don't think that's tied in at all.
Not at all. And I think you get this sense that the women deserve their fate as well. I mean, there's an excellent book about the women murdered by Jack the Ripper to try and redress the balance, but so often it's the male view of what happened and what was right and what wasn't right. So you don't hear the sort of counter argument about Anne Boleyn. She's widely, thought to be deserving of her fate for being inconstant or whatever it was that she was alleged to have been.
Yeah, and that kind of, I think it ties into the ways in which current media reports about domestic homicides. They're often like cheating wife murdered or something like that.
And the neighbours said he was a loving father. And is that a loving father murdering the mother of the children? How is that loving?
Yeah.
Or he was a good neighbour. So what? Really? Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah, and I think that, going back to what you were saying about the concerns about the manosphere and things like this, I think it's important to understand that that influence on young boys is not happening in isolation. If it's being supported by, for example, a narrative that maybe Anne Boleyn deserved to be killed, that's really building upon a kind of wider, maybe not as explicit and direct form of sexism, but kind of just the wider structures that they're grown up in, that then the manosphere can latch on to.
And we sort of link back to the books they're reading. These awful stories about men with no women, and the women are either prostitutes or subordinates, who's even in spectacles, the daughter is sort of being traded in marriage effectively. She has no agency. She's just they do what they're told, and often that's not a good example.
Yeah, no, and often there's not necessarily space to explore the violence involved in forced marriage or in prostitution, or these kind of systems of inequality is often presented as either something that just will inevitably happen, or a kind of personal failing on the part of the woman.
And also the counter argument is that you're not presenting any interesting, diverse stories to sort of spark the imagination of our children. We've got dreadful problem at the moment, particularly in this country, with children just not reading for pleasure. And we wring our hands about it, but do we not join the dots between that happening and the curriculum, where you've probably got teachers now who did an inspector calls for their GCSE and they're in the classroom teaching it again. They must be sick to death of it. And it's hard to inspire children with a love of reading if you're trotting out the same pale male stale stuff on an endless loop.
Because I think there are a lot of, children and teenagers still in school who are really interested and engaged in these topics as well, in terms of, gender equality, racial equality, things like this. So it's frustrating, I imagine, for them as well, that they're not getting to kind of explore that through their lessons.
Yeah, I mean, we get contacted by quite a lot of young people sort of expressing these concerns and saying, why is this inequality still existing? What can we do about it?
But it's encouraging to see that motivation.
Yeah, but we're a tiny charity with no resources and we're all volunteers, so we don't have the infrastructure or the resources to support youth groups, youth councils, which we'd love. We'd love to be able to do something like that in the future.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah. I thought it was really interesting as well in the Key Stage 3 English report that you guys produced, that some of the teachers had expressed that they basically weren't allowed to teach female-centred texts because the concern was that boys wouldn't be able to connect or weren't willing to empathise with women. The concern doesn't ever seem to go the other way, that a girl wouldn't relate to a boy or to a man.
It doesn't go the other way. But also, nobody scratched their head and thought, well, maybe the boys aren't all that interested in this stuff either. And that's why reading has reading for pleasure has fallen off to such a terrifying degree.
Yeah. No, it is very concerning, and I think it's concerning from an information literacy perspective as well. We're bombarded with information on social media from all different angles, and I think if you haven't been interested during English and really got those skills, and history as well, when you learn
it's about critical thinking, which, as you say, in an age where media is all sorts of forms of media are coming at you fast and thick, you need to be able to develop those skills, to be able to say, does this sound right? What do I think about this issue? Is this the way we should be behaving?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we're very hopeful. There's a curriculum and assessment review going on at the moment, which we've contributed to. And we would really like to see this issue addressed because it's incredibly important that there's gender equality in what's being taught.
Definitely.
And that the rich diversity of our society is reflected in what children are reading.
100%.
Yeah, there's a lot of academic pressure at a university level. So we're lucky enough to have a lot of author supporters who are backing our desire for 50-50 representation. But we've also got a lot of academics who've been very helpful in the history research, and they're doing some great work of their own, in looking at the contribution of medieval women and women in different aspects. So looking at women in STEM. So there is work going on. It just we need government to bring about change. We've actually put lesson plans on our website for the teaching of other alternative texts by women and by people from
really
different ethnicities as well, so that there are resources there if people want.
Because that's, I think, an important aspect of all of this. Obviously we're having an under-resourcing of most public services, including schools. So I think it is really important that there's the support there for teachers to change what they're teaching, because obviously adapting to teaching a new text requires additional lesson planning.
It's expensive and it's hard work, and our teachers are pushed to breaking point. They work incredibly hard, and we have immense respect for the work that they do. Many of the people in End Sexism in schools are teachers as well, so that's where a lot of us have come from.
Yeah, makes sense.
But there's been a fantastic initiative called Lit in Colour, which is Penguin have supported, and it's aimed at trying to bring diversity into the English literature curriculum.
In terms of ethnic diversity.
Ethnicity, rather than just gender. But that has had some success. So when we repeated the research to look at how many children at GCSE in 2024 studied at whole text written by a woman. It's actually nudged up to 5%, which is not exactly champagne cork popping news. But we think that's come directly from the inclusion of a Mallory Blackman text that Penguin have been supporting. So they've been providing resources for teachers and free copies of the book. So this can be done if there's the will there.
Yeah.
Teachers are very flexible and very keen to support these initiatives, but they need the right resources to do it. They can't do it on their own. So you need change from the top. So the exam boards aren't going to change without any impetus. Teachers can't change without support and resources. It's got to be at a government level. So there needs to be system change.
Yeah. And how did you get involved initially with End Sexism in schools then?
Well, partly by being part of the crowd research for the English literature. So, the first piece of work we did looking at the Key Stage 3, there was a call out for help with that. So I did some of the research and then just found it so fascinating that I started to do more and more with the charity.
Brilliant. And what was it about when you saw that call out that made you motivated to get involved?
Well, it just struck me, having supported a daughter through GCSEs and realising that she'd done these same boring pale males. She did, and in spectacles, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And just thinking this is so wrong in this day and age, that this is all our children are being provided with. And asking other parents like, my child did that. In fact, I did that at school. Not me personally, but friends. It's endless.
And what's the experience been like being involved with the organisation, from both in terms of the work itself and in terms of the people that you've met and all of those sorts of things?
Well, I think when you get involved with these, I'm sure your experience is similar, but when you get involved with feminist organisations, there's a lot of work to do, but there's a great solidarity. And so the thing that keeps you going is the friendships that you form with different women and different people from different backgrounds. And we live all over the UK at End Sexism in schools, but we get together and it's great fun as well. And I think that sort of solidarity and that feeling that we're all working for the same cause is really important and really motivating and sustaining.
And there's a shared values there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's shared values, but it's also because you're all different and you're coming at it from different perspectives. It's quite creative because you're challenging your own notions all the time. So it's really enjoyable from that point of view.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's so important having that variety of perspectives.
Yeah.
Because there's always things that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of that then, someone else can bring and you can bounce off of.
So I'm not a teacher, so I've got no idea of the challenges that teachers face trying to bring change or trying to tackle inequality in the classroom. So it's great to get the insights from some of our teachers to say, this is what's happening, this is how we could change it, this is what would work. No, that wouldn't work at all. Don't suggest that.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, because obviously you've mentioned that you work for a domestic abuse organisation and you're involved with this organisation, do you think there's something particular about the friendships that you make through these kind of feminist projects?
Yes, absolutely. I think coming at it as a middle-aged woman, not sort of, you think you've got your friendships sorted out, then you've made friends from school and uni and work or whichever it is. Suddenly meeting this incredible group of women who are all really inspired and motivated has been fantastic. It's been such a joy and felt like such a bonus. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy working alongside other women in the front line because they're just so interesting, funny, and inspiring generally all round. So that feminist friendship group is something I really treasure.
Yeah.
And it keeps you going as well when you're kind of, running up against a brick wall trying to, email another MP who ghosts you. Then it
can be a slow progress.
It can be a slow process. But I think we sort of link arms and keep each other going a bit as well, which is so important.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something about, any difficult, almost fight that you have to do, I think, so long as you're not doing it alone, it feels a lot less daunting.
It does, yeah, and you kind of pick up the slack for each other a little bit as well. So if one of you is saying, "Oh, this is my personal life is in chaos," or my mum's fallen and broken her hip, we will all sort of roll our sleeves up and help each other out. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Too, that you don't necessarily get in other social groupings. And I think there's that kind of understanding. It's almost like you have a shared language, which
sort of shared analysis. That's something I've noticed with, coming up against life's various challenges. It can be useful if you are speaking to people who've already have an awareness of like the systemic background to those things.
Yes.
I think especially speaking to friends about like their difficulties with dating and things like that, it can be useful to be able to be like, oh, and this is a wider issue. There are things underpinning this.
Yeah.
It's not just like that you are really unlucky randomly.
Yes.
Like, I think that can be both comforting and just kind of reassure you of your sanity.
Yeah, and then being able to substantiate your advice with research and information and help is really empowering, I think, too. Rather than, like we were talking earlier about being that friend that says, you've got to do, being the Emma Woodhouse of the world, saying, you must do this and you must leave him and you must marry him. Being able to say, oh, yeah, we've come across this and sometimes this is a helpful approach, or you might find reading this interesting, it might speak to you, try it.
I think learning from each other as well and kind of helping each other's like development, almost like your emotional and intellectual development, and respecting each other as like intellectual beings, I think is really powerful, meaningful as well.
Yeah, and it goes back to that idea that women are smart and clever and have ideas and can do things too, and that sort of mutual respect.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of encouragement when you decide you might want to take a new path, like a course of study. You get such a lot of support with it that it makes you feel like you can power on.
Yes,
when you're sort of sitting there cranking through an essay at midnight and your WhatsApp group is saying you've got this. Come on, you're really good at words. Do it.
Yeah. And then
writing.
You've got people to celebrate with as
yes,
well,
exactly.
Which is key, I think. And to actually recognise the wins as well.
Yeah, I think the women in the sector are incredibly generous. They were, generous with their time, with their intellectual resources, with their financial resources, with they're really supportive. It's it's a big hug movement. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I think if anybody's interested, we've got a website called endsexisminschools.org.uk.
Yeah, and I'll link it in the description.
Okay, and we've got our research up there. Sign up for a newsletter, volunteer, support us in any way you can if you're interested in the issues that we've been talking about.
And I'll say the reports are really fascinating.
Oh, thank you. There's more to come. Yeah, so stay tuned for English report on the 21st of August and hopefully history on about the 17th of September.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been such an interesting conversation. I feel like I've learnt a lot. And from the conversation and from reading the reports, I think it's amazing the work that you guys are all doing over at End Sexism in Schools.
Oh, I really love the opportunity, and it's made me really think about and value my friendships even more, I think, and also want to go back and read all of Jane Austen.
Oh yeah, she's fantastic. Yes, that's another recommendation.
Yes.
Read all of Jane Austen.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for listening to Let's Be Friends. We'll have new episodes coming out on the first Wednesday of each month. So do come back and let us know any recommendations of books that you would recommend that have interesting women's friendships in them. And thank you very much again, Sarah.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking about all of this.